Welcome back. Now, it's that time of the year again where students and parents are impatiently waiting for the 2022 matric results. Now, when those results are out, some school leavers wishing to pursue a tertiary education will be faced with several choices, and most of the time, it can be difficult to know exactly where to start. So, to help us unpack how students and parents can possibly navigate this process, we joined via Zoom now by Head of Student Recruitment and Marketing at higher education provider STADIO, Atelisha Harilal. Atelisha, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Firstly, when we look at tertiary education and, making these choices, whilst it is attractive, it can be exciting in the one sense, but it's also a very daunting prospect on the other hand for many young people who are finishing high school and, of course, their parents. So let's just talk about what the best way would be, Atelisha, to actually approach this particular process of selecting the most suitable route after high school.
So I think the first thing is kind of common knowledge, but I'm going to say it anyway, which is keep calm. I think we put so much of societal pressure and family pressure on young people during this time of the year that it adds to the choices they have to make and increases their stress levels. So I think it's important to keep calm and then from there, explore your options completely. So it's important for parents to keep themselves informed by conducting research and then communicate with your student. What is it that they aspire to do, where, and you should know by now where they have applied to, what have they received in terms of results from the institutions that they've applied to, and what will happen now when they achieve their results on the 19th and they receive those results. What are the options that will be open to them should those results then not be optimal? So I think it's key that parents and students are in constant communication and approach this process with the approach that it is not a rejection, it is a redirection to find a different path to still achieve your ambition.
And I guess one of the things that we perhaps need to touch on, Atelisha, is the fact that some parents actually live vicariously through their children. So you're hoping that your child would become the doctor that you couldn't become. Your child would become the lawyer that you couldn't be. And sometimes there may be some sort of a mismatch there in terms of what the parents' expectations are and what the child actually wants to do. So how do you approach that sort of situation where I think there's that famous tale where there was this man who went and studied to become a teacher because his father wanted him to study education, whereas he didn't want to. And when he was done, he actually went and gave it to his father and said, "There, this is for you." And then went on to do what he wanted to do. So how do we approach that sort of situation?
Look, I think a lot of parents have aspirations for their students based on their knowledge and also their experience. So the sense of legacy of following a career because it's a family tradition or attending a certain institution because it is a parent's alma mater is always present. And I think the key thing to remember is if a child is not passionate about this career, doesn't believe that this career, this world of work, this day-to-day life will be inspiring, stimulating, and give them passion to perform at their best, they are not going to succeed. So I think it's key that our parents remember the student has to be able to have the motivation to study independently when they approach their tertiary education studies and govern their time. And they simply will not dedicate their time and be dedicated to their success if you don't study something you are passionate about. So I would recommend that parents provide guidance, provide support, but listen to what the student is saying about the type of work environment they want, the type of world of work they want to enter into, and where do they see themselves in the next 5 years. And that will allow the parent then to provide the right kind of support. And it's important to remember, you may have one child who's an extremely brilliant academic performer, but no 5 fingers are the same. And you may have one who wants to go into the family business, who wants to become a doctor. And you may have another who would prefer a career in the arts. Both these human beings can be successful. Both these human beings can have a celebrated academic career. You just need to make sure you understand their ambition before you give them the advice of what career to pursue.
And I love that you talk about support here, Atelisha, because support for the children, but I suppose support for parents is also important here in trying to navigate this, because you could have this child who is absolutely brilliant academically, could have 11 A's at the end of matric, but who perhaps just wants to be a TV presenter. And you know, the parents, that may go against everything in them when they would expect so much more, because not that this isn't a good career, but obviously they have their own aspirations, as you say, and expectations of where they would like to see the child's career go. How do we support parents in this regard?
I think it's even more critical for us in South Africa. For a lot of our parents, they may not have had a tertiary education experience, but they want to give one to their child. So they're entering into a world which is new to them. And in some cases, they try and get advice. So I think the most important thing is your primary resource is using your own research. Understanding after conversation with your child. We spend a lot of time scrolling on our phones for other reasons, so for entertainment reasons, but research is also key. So a lot of information is available. Consume that information. Take advantage of institutions which offer you free student advisors who are there to assist students and guide them through the application process. So those are two resources you can access. In your high school, depending on the resources available, you may find there is a career counselor, there's an LO teacher who has experience in looking at students, looking at their aptitudes and advising them. That's another resource you can access. If as a parent you are unsure of anything during the application process, registration process, or qualification selection process, us as tertiary education institutions are here to guide you, to provide you with information, to explain concepts, expectations, and all manner of things. So don't hesitate and feel like there will be a consequence or a cost for this kind of advice. It is often free. So I would advise parents, please ask all your questions, visit the campuses of the institutions your child may be interested in visiting. And most importantly, research the career paths. There's a lot of new careers that were not possible when we were young and attempting tertiary education, jobs that didn't exist. So it's important that as parents, we educate ourselves. And the best way to do that is in tandem and in communication with your student.
So let me just ask two follow-up questions with regard to what you've just said. Firstly, in terms of parents assisting their children in choosing the correct or, you know, the better suited institution to go to, perhaps, Atelisha, something that's easier for parents who have themselves been to tertiary institutions, sometimes not so easy for those who haven't been there, not only in terms of knowing more or less what to expect, but also just in letting go. Because I've seen this firsthand where some parents are just not willing to let those kids go.
That is very much something I've experienced, particularly during registration. When early in my career, I would sit to assist a student to register, and mom and dad would do more speaking than the student. And I think it's key to understand that in tertiary education, all institutions communicate with the student directly. They are informed of their academic progress, they are informed of their requirements for assignments, and they have to consume that information and perform accordingly. So one of the best things a parent can do is be present, be supportive, but allow your child to negotiate this environment independently. be there to assist them, be present to ask the important questions. But as you see they are progressing to be more independent, allow them that independence. The tertiary education environment sometimes acts as a microcosm of the world of work. And the more earlier a student learns to be independent, self managing, the better it will be for their future success. So, whilst many parents do it from a place of concern and from wanting their child to succeed, it is also important to build independence and self management as a general life skill as well.
And it goes back to that support, isn't it, Atelisha, of, maybe providing that sort of support to parents who are uncertain, who are a bit apprehensive about an environment which they perhaps have not navigated themselves and are really not too keen on having their children experience that. I remember when my daughter wanted to go to UCT, that was her first choice. And I allowed her to go. That's where she wanted to go. And so many people asked me, how could you let your daughter go to UCT at 17 years old? And I can tell you, it was probably one of the best things that could ever happen, because the growth that I saw in her was immense. And even now, just in terms of simple things like having to manage a budget when you are more than 1,000 kilometers away from home and you can't quickly, run back home and get something, or you need to make do with what you have, all that far away from home. And she's become very thrifty. I'm trying to be nice about it, but she.
It's a life skill.
It's a life skill, but it's one that I appreciate now. And maybe we need to speak to each other more as parents in terms of giving support, in terms of what you can expect, where the pitfalls are, but also what some of the benefits may be of letting go.
Absolutely. What I've noticed is parents would rather chat over a braai and say, wow, my student got 11 A's, or she won the Dean's Award at university, rather than say, how did you feel when your child entered university? How did you feel when you allowed them to move to a different province? What was your experience? What's the advice you can give? And we often tend to keep that really private, and we only talk about when our child is immensely successful or graduating. But it's important that in communities, in families, this type of communication, this type of parental conversation is important, because what it does is it says to you, okay, here's a child from the same environment, from a similar community, who's had a great experience, and it will help to allay some of the fears. So communication and having a network is so central to parents as well as students. And I think oftentimes we negate what the parent is going through because we have the immediate issue of how do we get the student on the road to the right qualification and on the road to success. But the parent is going through an equal amount of anxiety regards a transition of the child moving out of home, of the child entering an education environment that's different and new, of them having to be independent and dictating their own study times. So it's very important that parents look for communities of support as well.
And I'd love for us, perhaps at a later stage, Atelisha, to talk about this in the context of culture as well, because there are so many cultural considerations that also are brought to bear at a time like this. But one of the other things you spoke about was innovative new career paths. And again, we don't seem to spend enough time looking at how the world of work has changed and how career options have changed over the years.
Absolutely. I think, I always laugh and have a chuckle because the consideration is the big three. You'll be a doctor, you'll be a lawyer, or you'll become a teacher. And these are all valid and great career pathways which contribute to the country. But there's a lot of new jobs. If I use the example of the sphere of digital marketing and e-commerce, which has grown exponentially during the time of COVID when we were all shopping online and learning the culture, there is an inordinate number of jobs and skilled jobs for which people can obtain tertiary education training, which parents don't understand this world. and understand what those career paths are. So it's key that we informed about new jobs because the world is constantly growing. And with the rate of technological advance right now, we are training students for jobs that they may not aspire to now, but they will aspire to upon graduation. And the ability to think critically while gaining critical future proof skills is a core to selecting the right qualification, as opposed to only looking to the traditional career paths, which are there, which our country does need. But there's much more than that. And you may have a student who aspires to do something in the field of information technology, digital marketing, design, animation. All of these have incredible potential to be great careers which can power the world of business.
And then, of course, it's about finding the correct institution that aligns with those aspirations that the student may have. But just as we wrap this up, Atelisha, parents and safety, the safety concerns are very, very real. You know, and again, I'm sorry to belabor this, but I can speak from some level of experience here.
Yes.
And, you know, it was so unfortunate that when the Uyinene case broke, when she was murdered in Cape Town, my daughter was at the same campus in the same vicinity. And when she came back, I realized she had a taser. And this was not something that we had discussed previously. I didn't even know how a taser works. And, you know, that was something that unsettled me somewhat because not being right there in that physical environment, I suppose I was concerned, I was worried, but for them to actually be there and be safe, you know, how do we negotiate that amongst yourself and the child and also with the institution?
You know, it's so, you come upon such an important point. And in South Africa, for women and girls, we know safety and security is a challenge, not only in tertiary education institutions, but wherever they may be. So there's some common sense rules that parents need to make sure that they have communicated to the student and that they have. So a lot of times I know students arrive for studies and the parent has never been to the campus to actually have a look at it. And it's challenging for some parents to actually get there. But I would encourage them by all means possible, know the campus, know the location, know the general vicinity where the student will be studying. Then understand their daily routes that they would travel. Are they living on a res that's on campus? Do they have a flat that's off campus? Will they be traveling with the lift club? Are they relying on public transport? And for the most part, understand their times and have a process that will allow you to know in general where they should be. Secondly, have clear conversations about how they can manage their safety. And, you know, the challenge is, as parents who are sending your students to tertiary, it shouldn't fall on you to have the sense of constant alertness and have to protect yourself all the time. Unfortunately, this is the world that we find ourselves in. And there's precautions that we would need to take. And besides that, there's numerous tech systems which university campuses can participate in that can allow you to see where the student has been by the swipe in and swipe out and biometric access, which will give you a clue as to their daily pathways should something go wrong. But I think what is key is that that insecurity or that fear shouldn't keep us from allowing them to be in the world, but trying to be in the world in a more informed, safe, and communicative manner. And I think there's general precautions which we all need to be aware of when engaging in public transport, the stranger danger of meeting people on university campus. And finally, know who your students' friends are. Particularly as they enter tertiary education, they may move from one social group to the other, make new friends on campus. It is always important to know who these people are, what they do, so that in the terrible case of something going wrong, you are aware of their friend groups, their movements, and you are more empowered. But it's important to have communication with these students, on how they should be taking care of themselves and what could be safe behaviors as advised by the university or the tertiary education institution they are attending.
Atelisha, thank you so much for your time this morning. Such an important conversation. Atelisha Harilal is Head of Student Recruitment and Marketing at higher education provider STADIO, talking to us about a myriad of issues, some of the options that school leavers may have as they wait for the official release of those matric results for 2022. And of course, we, as I say, should have perhaps a follow-up conversation about this, because the reality is that it is a whole new environment. It's very different from school, and parents have to obviously navigate this along with the students.